On Wednesday, 14 Americans...
The backdrop, the Oval Office. This is only the third time U.S. President Barack Obama has used this setting for a national address, meant to send a message of seriousness after the attacks in California that left 14 dead. Investigators looking into whether the killers were inspired by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. The president telling Americans he has a strategy to defeat the group.
The threat from terrorism is real, but we will overcome it.
He's had a tough time convincing the majority of Americans. According to recent polls, 57% disapprove of how he's handling the fight against ISIL. 72% say the effort is going badly. And 60% say it's time to send more troops into Iraq and Syria. His strategy is also facing serious criticism from Republican presidential candidates.
So for God's sakes, Mr. President, change your strategy, come up with a ground force to go in and destroy the caliphate before we get hit here at home.
The president had his own criticism for the U.S. Congress, saying it's time for new gun control legislation. That is unlikely. Just last week, the Senate voted down a bill that would have kept people on the no-fly list from buying weapons. President Obama also urged Americans not to frame this as a war against Islam.
That, too, is what groups like ISIL want. ISIL does not speak for Islam. They are thugs and killers, part of a cult of death, and they account for a tiny fraction of more than 1 billion Muslims around the world.
Before the speech, hundreds of advocates rallied outside the White House to send a similar message.
The basic thing is to make the world realize that the terrorism that they're seeing, not only domestically but internationally, is not representative of Islam.
The president using this speech from the Oval Office to try and calm fears, to assure Americans that he has a strategy to defeat ISIL, because it was clear after the speech he has no plans to change it. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.